2022 and the Winter Olympics are well underway. Now, I'm not usually much of a sports fan, but I love the Winter Games because first and foremost, I'm British, so expectations are far from high. You see, when the Summer Olympics are on, I get a sense of anxiety watching Team GB, the athletes who are there to represent my country. Because we're from this poxy little island with virtually no money for sport. But somehow they managed to get fourth in the medals table. That's a huge achievement, particularly if you watch the Tokyo entrance ceremony, where Team GB wandered in and it was 24 slightly bemused looking people. If you then compare that to Team USA, well, it looked like the Americans had sent everyone from their country under the age of 35. But with the Winter Olympics, there's none of that stress because we know the Brits are going to be right down the bottom of the medal table. For example, in the women's slalom, the British skier finished 28th out of 30, but I'm not knocking her. There's not the money or the facilities in this country to train world champion skiers. But by the same note, if I identified as a woman and had also entered the same race, she would have finished 2 places ahead of me. And bear in mind, I would have come down on one ski and I'd be sitting on it. Now, before we move on, I need to mention that there's one winter sport which I'm not interested in and nor do I watch, and that's curling. And if you're unfamiliar with that sport, it seems to have been dreamt up by someone who watched a game of lawn bowls and found it far too fast-paced and interesting, so instead decided to slide a lump of rock along the ice whilst another person walks in front of it and brushes up. So why do I love the Winter Games so much? Well, I think I heard it summed up perfectly yesterday, and this is a direct quote from an Asian guy who said, "The Winter Olympics prove that white people are fucking mental." And I think I get where he's coming from, because in the Winter Olympics the vast majority of competitors are Caucasian, although it has to be said the vast majority of medalists probably won't be. But every winter sport, when you stop and look at it, is utterly fucking insane. One of the oldest sports is the men's downhill. And where else do you get to watch a bloke fall over at 80 miles an hour? And we were watching the women's giant slalom and one of the competitors crashed out. At which point Mrs. Disgruntled casually looked towards the television and asked, "Is she dead?" Now thankfully the athlete was okay, but it looked like it could have gone either way. Next, take ski jumping. Who is it that's growing up thinking what they want to do is hurtle down a 45-degree slope so they can fly the length of a football pitch in the knowledge that if anything goes wrong, they'll get paralysed or die? But given some of the newer sports in freestyle skiing and snowboarding, now ski jumping looks fairly fucking tame. The easiest way to sum this up is that I was watching a snowboarding event, and halfway down the course the competitors had to slide along a building's roof. Now, if I'm travelling at speed and I see a roof below me, generally I'll be hoping I'm on an aircraft. But even they aren't the maddest competitors at the Winter Games. For them, you need a collection of athletes who are known as sliders. I remember winters past when I was a young boy, waking up overjoyed to see it had been snowing and knowing I could go out sledging. Well, some people took it much more seriously than me because they grew up to use very large sledges called bobsleigh, which they pilot down the ice at speeds faster than I can legally drive my bloody car. And they endure G-forces so extreme if they get their breathing wrong, their lungs can collapse. And these are the sensible sliders, because I would question the sanity of anyone who decides to become a lugist. What mindset does one have to wrap oneself up in cling film, get onto a picnic tray and hurl themselves down the side of a mountain? But even these guys aren't the maddest. For that we need another event, one which Team GB dominates: skeleton. The British aren't predicted to do as well this time out because they're running a young and inexperienced skeleton team. But anyway, the skeleton bobsleigh, I guess that appeals to people who've looked at the luge and thought, I would rather be much closer to the ice and go down head first because that's even more fucking dangerous. Of course, by their very nature, all the sports I've mentioned are fast and hazardous. But one I didn't think was dangerous was figure skating. Now, I've never been a fan, but the wife is. But recently, I'm finding figure skaters as fascinating as gymnasts at the Summer Games. And partially that's because I've now reached an age where, because my jacket's got 6 pockets, it'll take me a minute to find my keys, and I get lightheaded if I do something wild and outlandish like standing up. So these people, who are apparently not governed by the same laws of physics that the rest of us are, well, I wasn't really that interested, and I wasn't paying attention to the television, but Mrs. Disgruntled loves it. But then I overheard the commentator say something, and I was interested. He said, there they go, into the death spiral. The fucking death spiral. So now I was watching, and this move, as well as many others, had me thinking, if either of them make a mistake, then that young Russian woman is either going to have a broken neck or her head caved in. Wear a helmet, love. And we know that figure skaters look beautiful with their radiant smiles, but I kept thinking she's going to look very different dead on the ice, whilst her partner has to go and borrow a broom from the curlers to sweep her brains up. And I think that sums up why I love the Winter Olympics. It's 2 weeks of competition where I look at almost every event and think, fuck that for a game of soldiers. As ever, thanks for watching.